Imagine you wake up tomorrow and your phone's map app can't find you. Planes are stuck on the ground, high-frequency trading freezes, and emergency services are suddenly guessing. Not because the internet is down, not because the power went out, but because every satellite around Earth just went dark for 24 hours. No GPS, no weather satellites, no communications birds relaying signals over oceans. So what actually happens in those 24 hours, and what does not happen despite the doomsday memes? Let's press play on this blackout and see how fast modern life starts to wobble. Right now, there are on the order of 10 to 12,000 active satellites orbiting our planet, from navigation and communication spacecraft to Earth-observing weather eyes and military assets. 4 big global navigation satellite systems, GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, and Beidou, plus a couple of regional systems like NAVIC and QZSS, give us location and ultra-precise timing everywhere on Earth. Those timing signals quietly sync power grids, cell towers, financial trades, and more. At the same time, over 95% of international internet traffic actually rides undersea fiber optic cables, not satellites, so the whole internet dies is not what happens here. But knock out all satellites for just one day, and you do not break everything, you stress all the critical systems at once. And that's where it gets interesting. The blackout starts instantly. Every satellite stops transmitting. At first, you probably think your phone is just buggy. Maps will not lock onto your location, rideshare apps cannot find drivers accurately, delivery navigation turns jittery, then useless. GNSS receivers in phones, ships, planes, and trucks suddenly lose their satellite signals. The constellations are still up there, but they are silent. This kind of loss of lock actually happens in miniature during strong space weather, so we know roughly what it looks like. Airlines start noticing quickly. Modern aviation relies heavily on satellite navigation and satellite-based augmentation systems, even though old-school ground beacons and inertial systems still exist. With global GNSS suddenly gone, many flights delay departure or divert, especially in busy airspace and poor weather. Air traffic control does not vanish, but the margin for error shrinks, and when safety margins shrink, the default move is to slow down, spread out, and stop launching new planes. Meanwhile, somewhere in the background, something more subtle and scarier is already starting. Clocks are drifting. Global navigation systems are really global timing systems with a location as a bonus. They provide nanosecond-level timing that feeds into telecom networks, power systems, and financial markets. Without satellite timing, cell towers fall back to their internal clocks and any terrestrial backups. Over a few hours, slight timing differences add up. Some networks see reduced throughput or dropped calls as synchronization drifts. High-frequency trading desks and big financial exchanges also depend on extremely precise, traceable timestamps for transactions. Losing this signal can degrade performance and introduce errors if it is not properly backed up. What do markets do when time gets fuzzy? They get conservative. Exchanges might throttle certain automated trades or switch to backup timing sources. Some ultra-fast strategies simply halt. There is no Mad Max stock meltdown, but definitely a nervous, slower day. Shipping and trucking companies that use satellite navigation for fleet tracking and routing switch to manual check-ins, terrestrial radio, and any legacy systems they still have. Everything still moves, just less efficiently and with more human stress. So far, the world is mostly annoyed, not collapsing. But the pressure is building in 2 critical places, in the sky and in the grid. Weather satellites are our eyes on the atmosphere and oceans. They track storms, hurricanes, and evolving cloud systems that feed into global forecast models. If all satellites go dark, meteorologists suddenly lose current satellite imagery. They still have ground-based radar, weather balloons, and surface stations, but no fresh wide-angle view from space. For a 24-hour outage, your local forecast doesn't instantly become useless, but near real-time tracking of rapidly changing systems like tropical storms or fast-moving frontal systems gets worse. If this imaginary blackout hit during a major hurricane or typhoon, emergency managers would be far less confident about its intensity and track. Now, the grid. Modern power systems increasingly use GPS-based timing to synchronize measurements and control distributed energy resources. Losing satellite timing can, if it is not mitigated, lead to misaligned measurements and complicate grid operations, especially in complex, modernized networks.
Most big grid operators know this and are working on backups, from high-stability local clocks to terrestrial timing systems. But for several hours, operators would be double-checking alarms, switching to backup references, and possibly taking conservative actions like shedding non-critical loads to keep the system stable. The lights likely stay on for most people, but only because humans are scrambling behind the scenes. And we still have not hit the most quietly dangerous part of this day. By now, airlines have mostly grounded flights that rely heavily on satellite navigation. Shipping routes slow. Some satellite-based TV and internet services, especially in remote areas and at sea, are just gone until the blackout ends. Here is the twist. Even though satellites carry only a small share of total internet traffic compared to undersea cables, they are crucial for remote communities, ships, planes, isolated research stations, and disaster areas. So the people who feel this outage the most are often the ones with the fewest alternatives. Emergency services and military forces lose many satellite communication channels and satellite imagery. They can fall back on terrestrial radio, fiber, and pre-planned contingencies, but coordination for global operations absolutely becomes harder. Meanwhile, more and more systems have quietly discovered the same thing. They all lean on satellite timing. Telecom, finance, transportation, energy. Each sector might have a workaround, but they often assumed satellites would basically always be there. Experts now call this a massive single point of failure. In a 24-hour outage, redundancy and human decision-making probably prevent outright catastrophe. But if you extend this scenario to several days, that is where we would start to see real blackouts, serious navigation incidents, and sustained communication failures. So the obvious question is, could such a blackout really happen? Our 24-hour all-satellites dark day is hypothetical, but pieces of it are absolutely real risks. Strong space weather, driven by coronal mass ejections from the sun, can disturb Earth's magnetosphere and ionosphere, disrupting radio and satellite navigation signals, and in extreme cases damaging satellites. Official space weather scales describe how severe storms can degrade GPS and satellite communications. Deliberate interference and cyber attacks are another concern. GNSS signals are weak when they reach Earth, so they're vulnerable to jamming and spoofing. Reports and studies show that satellite disruption is already happening in some regions, especially near conflict zones. Space debris and collisions add another layer. With tens of thousands of trackable objects and thousands of active satellites crowding orbits, the risk of collisions and debris chains is rising, which could degrade or even wipe out parts of key constellations if not managed. A perfectly synchronized, total 24-hour blackout of all satellites at once would require an extreme, coordinated catastrophe. That is not something current science or policy treats as a likely scenario. But partial blackouts, regional navigation loss, temporary satellite communication outages, or space weather-driven disruptions are not science fiction. They're on official risk registers today. And that is why governments and companies are scrambling to build a Plan B. Space agencies, defense organizations, and commercial operators are investing heavily in space situational awareness, tracking objects and predicting close approaches to avoid collisions. Satellite constellations are being designed with redundancy, more satellites, overlapping coverage, and the ability to route around failures, like we already see with large internet constellations.
On the ground, critical sectors are developing alternatives to satellite timing and navigation. They're building terrestrial radio navigation and timing systems. They're adding high-stability atomic clocks in key facilities. They're rolling out more resilient, multi-source timing solutions for power grids and telecom networks. Space weather agencies monitor the sun and issue alerts, watches, and warnings when strong solar storms are expected, giving operators time to put satellites into safer modes or switch to backup procedures. We're basically admitting that satellites are too important to be a single point of failure, and then trying to undo that mistake while still launching thousands more. So, what happens if all satellites go dark for 24 hours? You don't get instant global collapse. You get a day of grounded or delayed flights, messy navigation, stressed-out grid operators, slower financial markets, confused logistics, and millions of people suddenly realizing how much they rely on a signal they never see. Thanks to undersea cables, most of the internet keeps flowing. Thanks to backups and human expertise, most power stays on. But that day exposes a fragile truth. Modern civilization was built assuming that space would always quietly cooperate. The real story isn't one bad day and we're doomed. It's that we've concentrated so much navigation, timing, weather, and communication power into a thin shell of hardware orbiting above us that losing it, even briefly, becomes a global stress test. And the next time your phone grabs your location in a fraction of a second, remember this: you're not just talking to your device, you're talking to an entire invisible infrastructure in space, and the world really doesn't want to find out what happens if it all goes silent at once. This story is a hypothetical scenario based on current scientific understanding and publicly available information. It is for educational and informational purposes only and is not technical, operational, financial, or emergency planning advice, because real-world risks and responses can change as new data and technologies emerge.